Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to Spa-Francorchamps for the Radical Cup Europe here in Belgium. A fabulous couple of races we had in Mugello with the 2 hour-long affairs, and with races today and tomorrow for the Radicals around a spectacular circuit, the 7 kilometers and the massive gradient change, of course, here as well. There's also something that strikes you as you walk into Spa this early in the morning, a great deal of construction work going on. So a brand new observation tower, I think for hospitality, all timed for the Grand Prix a little bit later on this season. Temperature is pretty decent, considering we're still in April at 17 degrees Celsius. I think there is a chance of some passing showers through the course of the weekend, but today it's dry. And here are the cars about to head out for their qualifying sessions to determine 2 grids. We have a race today and we have a race tomorrow, so therefore qualifying sessions for each of those races, and an opportunity perhaps for some for the first time to experience Spa-Francorchamps, which will be one of those massive kind of bucket list things to do, I am sure. So it's me, Johnny Palmer. I'm delighted to say that Simon is back on the team this weekend, because of course you joined us in Dubai as well. You were in Mugello but busy on other duties, so welcome back to the booth. There's nowhere else quite like Spa.
There is no one like Spa, nowhere like Spa, as you quite rightly said. And it's you walk in, as you say, you walk into the circuit in the morning, especially on a day like today. The weather is beautiful. It's a wonderful spring day, and you're reminded instantly of the history of the place. You know, since the 1920s, there's been motorsport here, here in Nürburgring, which is not a million miles away.
Yeah.
2 of the literally the most iconic European circuits, and any racing driver worth their salt will come here and instantly fall in love with the place. Every driver I certainly know who's ever driven here is like, it's absolutely always in the top 3 of tracks you've ever been to. I was lucky enough to race here once back in 2000, and actually got on the podium.
Did you?
Somehow.
Okay.
So I've got very fond memories of the place. But I can remember actually my friend Mark Cole, who I was racing with at the time, decided it would be a good idea for us to do a track walk. And we hadn't quite taken on board the length of the circuit when we did that. So we got about as far as the halfway down the Kemmel Straight, when it, surprisingly enough for Spa, it started raining heavily, and then realised we had an exceptionally long walk in the pouring rain. But I don't really know what we learned from that. It must have been all right, because I got on a podium. So.
Well, yeah, so it's worthwhile doing. But yeah, once you get to the end of the Kemmel Straight up at Les Combes, you might be thinking, actually, this was a bad idea. We're already so far from home, you might as well just finish the lap. It's 7 kilometres, 4.4 miles, but also the massively striking thing is, particularly when you do get a chance to walk it, is how much it goes up and downhill. I mean, to actually walk from Eau Rouge and then up Radion, you feel it in your calves. You think, oh, this is so steep, and the speed that you approach then in the middle of the race, even in something like a Radical, really does grab your attention, because there is zero margin for error through Eau Rouge and Radion.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we know Eau Rouge is the most famous corner here, of course. But also, you know, I think most drivers, certainly I can only relate to my very brief experience of the place. Blanchimont was a corner, and Pouhon were the 2 corners that, with the, you know, in addition to Eau Rouge, that really catch your attention. And every racing driver will probably say the same thing, that you have to be absolutely laser focused on those particular corners in terms of your turning point, in terms of how you carry the speed in there. You know, sometimes I would imagine, and we need to catch up with some drivers later, that maybe Blanchimont is flat in one of these. If it's on new tyres, low fuel, I would suggest potentially that's flat. Okay, so drivers, that's your challenge.
So you've laid it down from
an old retired racing driver here. Go on, folks, go out there and go flat through Blanchimont. Come on, show us what you're made of. But yeah, most importantly, you know, these guys and girls will be going out there and just getting themselves into a rhythm. Usually, I think you talk to a lot of drivers in terms of their outlap, how they prep the car and themselves for a push lap. You know, we've all heard the radio communications in things like Formula One when they use the phrase push, cool, push, which, as we know, is basically go for it, cool your tyres, go again, and get another lap out of the tyres. Obviously, when you've got such a long circuit, it's maybe not quite as easy to do that in terms of, yes, of course, you still do a push, cool, push, but you have to make those laps count. So we talked a little bit, I mentioned Blanchimont here and Pouon. This is Pouon, this double left-hander here. Famously, you go back in history and watch, obviously, we all know Formula One here over the years. I think it was Kimi who went through there and had a massive snap of oversteer. As in, like, the original Kimi.
I'm going to say,
not the new
you
Kimi.
probably should clarify, considering the complication we've had quite recently.
Kimmys now.
Yeah, I know. Kimi Raikkonen, if anybody remembers him. Didn't he win the championship in 2007?
He did indeed.
Yeah,
the OG, I think we will refer to him as. But anyway, I do remember in a McLaren him having a massive snap of oversteer through there. And it was, I think, what drivers would say, giving you a focus. It's probably a good way to describe it. But for these drivers, obviously, they're building up now on new tyres, getting the tyres in nice and gently, making sure they don't take too much out. Because it is such a long lap, that build lap will obviously be, you know, proportionally probably twice as long as a normal build lap. So they really can see, you know, when we see the cars on track there, just generally taking a fairly gentle approach to that outlap.
You mentioned Pouon and the fact that it's incredibly quick on the approach there. They've added a gravel trap on the outside of that bend, so it's even more jeopardy potentially, as now there's a lock-up for one of the first runners out on the track. That's the number 26 radical of Luc Broik, a name you'll be far more familiar with from the 24-hour series cars, but guest driving this weekend and part of the Creventic team. So the Broik family are huge racing enthusiasts, and Luke just testing the level of the brakes going into La Source. You were mentioning that maybe just a single lap wouldn't necessarily get everything up to temperature, including tyres, considering we're only 17 degrees in the ambient at the moment. But we will allow them a few more moments to get to grips with the track. This is the first of two 20-minute sessions, by the way. So the first 20-minute qualifying session decides the grid for race one. Then we have a 5-minute interval period, and then there's another 20-minute session which decides the grid for race two. So, as I say, there've been the addition of gravel traps at Pouon. There's maybe a bit more gravel now coming out of the right-hander at Campus Corner, which is the old Stavelot, where the old circuit feeds in, used to feed in from the left and into Curve Paul Frere, and then Blanchimont being the left-hander that Simon's already referred to. We had some controversy in Mugello, which you might not be aware of, Si, because obviously you're busy with other stuff, but there's no question that just about one of the quickest drivers in this championship is Marcus Littlewood. He took what he thought was two pole positions. There's a very wide moment there coming out of Campus Corner, but both Marcus's car and someone else, and I'll try and remember the name of said person, had all their times deleted because of a ride height infringement after the qualifying session. So that made it fascinating for Joe Bradley and I, because Marcus Littlewood had to start both races from the back of the grid. And by about the first three corners, Marcus had overtaken probably 2/3 of the field. So even starting at the back wouldn't necessarily deny him a win. But that's another thing, is that it's a balancing act through qualifying. How much risk do you take from a setup point of view to try and get a good time? Because you need to pass the tests at the end of the sessions. Exactly.
And, you know, Marcus, obviously the British champion from Radicals, instantly marking just how fast he is when he was there. He also had a lot of, unfortunately, had a lot of laps excluded for track limits at Mugello, excuse me, which is maybe less of an issue here at Spa-Francorchamps. Track limits is usually involves you getting into the wall if you get it wrong here, so yes, perhaps a slightly different kind of track limits. But yeah, Marcus definitely, I mean, championship leader at the moment, definitely one of the drivers that we would expect to be instantly on the pace. But Luc Broik, as you mentioned earlier, that we were watching, we saw him have a little lock-up going into La Source hairpin. We know very well, as you quite rightly said, Johnny, from the Creventic 24H series, driving for the family Red Camels Jordan team. in one of the 992 cars. Both him and his brother exceptionally fast in that. Dad and two brothers, basically, isn't it, in that team most of the time. But these cars, exceptionally light. They're in the sort of 600 kilo bracket with enough power to weight ratio to make them an extremely challenging car to drive. They're driver friendly but challenging, and that's probably what all of these drivers want, is that they need to be pushing themselves. One of the drivers most recently that's taken a step from radicals into international GT racing is Chris Lulham.
Yep.
So Chris Lulham, a British champion a couple of years ago, renowned for his success in the sim racing world, as well as obviously being physically as in the real racing, an exceptionally talented racing driver. And a certain Mr. M. Verstappen seemed to notice this. Hence, Chris is now racing for Verstappen's race team in GTs. He's doing GT World Challenge last weekend. He was at Paul Ricard, and will be doing, I think, as a result, the 24 Hours of Spa. The race here, which is one of the 4 big ones, isn't it?
It is.
That's going to be at the end of June. So, everybody who's worth anything in GT racing will be here at the end of June. I stopped for some fuel earlier today, and already there's promotions in the fuel stations of that event coming up. So. Okay,
what are your 4 big ones, just out of interest?
Le Mans, Daytona, Spa, Nürburgring.
Yeah, okay, they're the same.
I believe. You're much more of a sports car racing expert than me, Johnny. So
there is sometimes a difference of opinion, but they are, for me, the kind of Grand Slam 24-hour races.
Exactly. We just watched Rory McIlroy win his 2nd Masters last weekend. So if it was, if that was motorsport, that would be one of them, wouldn't it? If you see what I mean. That's a very, very poor analogy, so I do apologise, folks, for that.
It totally works. It totally works. It's fine. So, already setting the pace then is Luke Kendall, the American, who's actually new to the radical scene in 2025, but was 5th in the Radical World Finals in Virginia, and now competing in European competition. So great to have Luke on board in the 54 car. He's marginally faster than Marcus Littlewood, and as I say, Littlewood, having set the pace in Mugello, had to do it the hard way from the back of the grid. He did win race 1 in Italy, but then did not win race 2, and that was partly due to the penalties that are issued according to your most recent results, but also your driver makeup as well. So if you're sharing a car, it depends whether it's a bronze, silver or silver combo. And then if you're solo driving, you get a slightly larger pit stop. It's not a penalty, but there's a minimum reference time that you must therefore be spending in the pit lane. I think actually for the radicals it's done on how long the car is stationary rather than being timed from pit in to pit out, but it kind of results in the same thing, and therefore more time needing to be spent in the pits as per the regulations makes it a more interesting race from our point of view, because if you continually start to win races, then you are going to be pegged back in the next races. So rather than having success ballast, physical weight, you have success time instead moving forward.
So interesting to see Peter Gustafsson, the Swedish driver, purple sector 1, green sector 2. Let's see where he ends up, crossing the line with a 2:35.117. And that then puts him, he's currently P16. So the Marcus Littlewood now looking very, very strong. Purple middle sector, green sector 1 and sector 3, currently sitting P2, and is just, where are we? 0.084 of a second off pole. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. Palmer, but that's what to call it around a circuit like this, isn't it?
It's certainly an impressive time, isn't it? To be getting down to that sort of margin this early on in the session.
P1 for Marcus there on that lap 2. Crosses the line with a 2:25.504. So that then puts him on pole by 0.756 of a second ahead of Luke Kendall in the Valor Racing car just behind him. So a very impressive lap, and we watch Peter Gustafsson, the 9 car there, Swedish driver driving for Vortex Performance. in an SR10. So just a bit of clarification, folks, is that most of the cars on the grid are the Radical SR3 XXR specification car, but Peter is in an SR10, slightly different spec. Kind of in a class of his own, quite literally.
Well, yeah, that's worth pointing out because it may well have different performance capabilities. The SR10 Radical. Gustafsson is on a bit of a flyer though, so we should be wary of what he might be able to do as well. Down in 16th position, but he's just done an absolute best through the first sector. Only 65 thousandths of a second off Marcus Littlewood's time. I assume that's Marcus Littlewood's time that we're comparing it to. So Luke Kendall, as you've mentioned, for Valor Racing has dropped to second fastest, third quickest now for Andy Lowe. So he slots into third ahead of Luke Breukers. The other driver I was about to say keep your eye on for is Peter Padden, another one of the many Australians in this championship. Also races in the Radical Cup Australia and was actually a champion in that 2 years ago. But Padden might have had a lap deleted there because he was fourth fastest and now has dropped down as now Stevens goes over the line to post. What time was that? Again, though, drops down. So there's quite a lot of laps being deleted for track limits, I assume. And the updates are flashing up at the top of our timing screen. Marcus Littlewood fastest from Luke Kendall. And now into third quickest is Jack Yang in the number 21 car. So Jack's time is a 2:26.663, which makes Valor Racing second and third fastest. Littlewood's going even quicker though, Simon, and that's a 2:24.680. He goes 4 further tenths clear now of the two Valor Racing cars behind.
Yeah, very impressive lap by Marcus. He's clearly in the groove. The car's working exceptionally well. Let's just hope that the track limits hoodoo doesn't come and get him again this time, because he was absolutely on for pole. That and the, as you quite rightly said, the ride height issues that they had. But clearly him and the car working exceptionally well. It'd be really interesting to see Marcus is a good example of a young driver that clearly has the talent and the drive to potentially move into international racing at highest level. So a bit like a Chris Lullum, you could easily see him moving into GT racing and competing in maybe something like the Creventic 24H series or other GT3 series, for example, or even GT4. So it'd be interesting to see how that unfolds for him.
Session time is still actually reasonable, but 6 more minutes to go. Remember, they get another 20 minutes at the end of this as well. Maybe some tweaks will be done to the cars. Possible concern at the moment for the number 55 car, and that is Jess Franson, who is parked in the pit lane, the Dane, and not going anywhere fast. So that car 20th in the order, but clearly some car issues currently being sorted there. Might even be a bit of setup change, but I think Jess has been there for a little while now. Littlewood improves once more. We are just talking about hundredths of a second though right now, which around 7 kilometers is mightily impressive. The car turnout is, I wouldn't say significantly more than Mugello, but clearly plenty more people have been attracted to this part of Europe to take part in some key races this weekend. And at the sharp end, yes, there's 0.4 of a second the gap, but Littlewood is toying with hundredths of seconds here and there to just improve his time again. So he's not going to sit on that advantage of 0.4.
Yeah, no, 0.4 sounds like a decent, you know, most tracks 0.4 is a big chunk, isn't it? If you're at somewhere like Brands Hatch, you'd be on pole by a country mile if there is such a phrase. But yeah, so 0.4 is a decent chunk at most tracks, but here, relatively speaking, is not a lot, but still very impressive. And you know, he was so impressive at Mugello at the opening round. Bear in mind, as we said, he had to start at the back of the grid. Luke Kendall 2:24 now goes to the top of the times. Very impressive lap. Let's see what Littlewood does. Across his line, is he going to improve it? No, he doesn't. So it's now. Let's have a little look at where we are. Luke Kendall is quickest at the moment with a 2:24.587 and just 0.093, so less than 1/10 of a second quicker than Marcus Littlewood. So as you quite rightly said, Johnny. You know, Marcus is not going to sit on his laurels, even more so now. He's got to work a little bit harder and find a little bit more time with just under 4 minutes remaining of this session. Now, remember, we have effectively 2 back-to-back sessions here for qualifying at Spa-Francorchamps, which means that the drivers, and a bit of a sort of a dismissive wave of the hand there from Luke. I think he got a bit blocked by another driver there, which unfortunately can happen. Even on a long lap like this, that can happen. So I don't blame him for being a little bit frustrated. But the 54 car there, working exceptionally well, and he's clearly in a groove. Just looking at where he's at, he had a purple sector at the end there, looking like he was on for it. Just looking at his first sector, a little bit down on his best, so maybe not an improvement as we just seen. He may well have had a bit of traffic. 33 and 38 having track limits issues, so that is the 33 car of Eddie Van Dam, the Dutchman. And what was the other car? 38, wasn't it? I think was the other car that we saw.
It wasn't 30 yet. It might have been 38. Hang on. Yes, so that's either Sebastian Schou or Morten Stromsted. I'm sure the timing screen somewhere tells us which driver is doing qualifying. But because they're sharing a car at Step Motorsport, I'm guessing that one driver, Sebastian, perhaps will do qualifying 1, and then Morten Stromsted will do the other. But Sebastian Schou was impressive in Mugello, actually benefiting from those ride height infringements after qualifying, which actually put Sebastian on pole position for the first race in Mugello. He was an overall champion of the Radical Cup Scandinavia Championship in previous years.
Just seeing on the timing screens that Yang has just set a purple middle sector, 103.160 through the middle sector. And just to put a bit of context in that, watching the GT3 cars here the other day on the timing screens there, that middle sector is around about 101, I think was the purple time. So it's only a couple of seconds slower than a GT3 car through. It shows you just how much mechanical grip these cars have got. You know, for a relatively low-powered car, for a smaller engine, but an exceptionally light car, you know, 600 and something kilos compared to a GT3 car, which is about 400 kilos heavier.
Yeah. That is another difference actually between the SR3 and the SR10. We've only got one SR10 in the field, but it's an extra 105 kilos for an SR10 XXR. But they do have quite a bit more horsepower as well, 425 in an SR10 compared to the 230 horsepower in an SR3 XXR. I just caught the sight of number 3, Marcus Littlewood. Here he is at the end of the Kemmel Straight, working his way through Les Combes now. And the gauntlet's been thrown down somewhat by Luke Kendall in number 54, because Luke is a little bit faster now, and I really do mean a little bit faster, at 93 thousandths of a second over the number 3 car of Marcus Littlewood.
A green sector for Marcus in the first sector, about probably about half, 6 hundredths quicker than Luke Kendall in the first sector. So if he can continue that through the next couple of sectors, I'm watching with interest to see him. You know, the 3 drivers that are really in the fight is Kendall, Littlewood and Yang. They're the 3 drivers that we're probably expecting to see. One of those drivers on pole, I would suggest, from what we're seeing. As I said, 43.309, a green sector also for Littlewood in his, sorry, for Luke Kendall in his middle sector, but a purple sector for Marcus Littlewood. He is just over 2 tenths quicker than Luke Kendall in the middle sector, which is the longest sector of the lap. So relatively short run down to the end of the lap. So we watch with interest as both those drivers come to the end. It's going to be, this is the lap, isn't it, Johnny? This is the final lap. This is the one that's going to decide which of those guys gets on pole position here at Spa-Francorchamps this morning.
And Jack Yang is going to be behind them on the track, so he might have a final say on this as well. So we're waiting. Luke Kendall crossing the line, but Littlewood snatches it by a quarter of a second, potentially at the death. He's certainly faster than Luke Kendall, but we do need to keep our eye on Jack Yang and what he can do, but he has not gone green through the first sector. So Littlewood timing that almost perfectly with a personal best, an absolute best, and then a PB to finish the lap. And you hook it all together, a 2:24.3 from Marcus Littlewood. That is a stellar work, not bowing to the pressure, knowing he basically had one more shot at it, and it looks like he's got it right on the nose there. But as I say, can't necessarily consider himself on pole position until Jack Yang completes this lap. We're waiting for the all-important middle sector. Jack Yang in this number 21 car, and I think if Jack doesn't go green, which he doesn't through sector 2, I reckon Marcus has got this.
Yeah, he's 8/10 down on Marcus in that middle sector. So unless he basically jumps the chicane at the end of the lap, not suggesting he would do something as nefarious as that.
It has been tried in the past.
Well, you know, we've seen worse, haven't we?
Yes, yes.
Famously, you remember the Hamilton and Raikkonen incident? I think it was 09 when Hamilton ended up cutting chicane and gave it back and still got a penalty, and Kimi won the race. Ferrari's only win that year in 2009. There's my anorak fact.
Very good.
Today.
I'm impressed.
But yeah, great lap by Jack Yang, but not quite enough. He's going to start the race from 3rd position. But Littlewood takes pole position. Let's hope he keeps it this time, because he deserves it. What a superb. Anybody who takes pole position around Spa-Francorchamps has earned their pole position by having to be exceptionally committed, exceptionally brave. And what a great battle between those 2 drivers at the top, or 3 drivers really. And I'm sure that the race will be a similarly close fought affair.
Great to have Luke Kendall with us this weekend, though, clearly offering stern competition to Marcus Littlewood, which is what we like. We're all, you know, from a commentary point of view, try to remain as neutral as possible and want a fair fight, ideally, for the full races this weekend. So certainly Luke's presence is going to give Marcus something to think about. And of course, if Luke starts to win races, then he's going to be pegged back with the success time penalties as well. And that's the nice thing about how the Radical Championship works. It keeps it even, and it should keep the championship battle going all the way through to the end of the season.
Yeah, so we just look at a 911 car of Olsen. He is 8th in this session, so good performance by him. Luke Breukers, that you mentioned at the beginning, we saw him right on track at the very beginning of this session as we look at this spectacular view of the Ardennes Forest. It's the commentator's bingo, isn't it, when you're at Spa-Francorchamps? You have to mention the Ardennes Forest.
Yeah, pretty much.
Once
Yeah.
Commentary.
But did you know that the Ardennes kind of continues all the way up to the edge of the Eiffel? It's basically all the same forest.
Really?
Yeah, so it, like you said, the Nürburgring is not that far from here, and the trees sort of continue in a certain part of Belgium and then into Germany, and you could call it the same bit of forest. That would be some walk if you did it, mind you. Right, Marcus Littlewood has made it back to the pit lane after his cooling down lap, and we can say a very good morning to Sarah Esser, back on our team as she was in Mugello and in the Dubai 24 Hours, of course, to see what he's got to say.
Good morning. Yes, starting off with Marcus down here. Marcus, welcome to Spa. What a track. And I mean, we've got lucky with the weather so far. Incredible start for you out in the first qualifying session.
Yeah, I didn't even know where I was, to be honest, when I come in. That's news to me. But yeah, it's good quali. Felt okay. A bit of traffic when the tyres came on. So yeah, hopefully the tyres stay in for the next run, and yeah, hopefully we get the job done. But yeah, still a lot of work to do.
Still a lot of work to do. Tell us what's going through your mind now. What corners are you thinking about? Where do you think you can improve maybe just a little bit more out in the second qualifying session?
I think there was no regrets from that run. I was happy with it. I just need to pick a better track positioning and go again.
Well, wonderful to see you back here, and good luck for qualifying number 2. See you then.
Sarah speaking to Marcus Littlewood, keeping his powder dry. I like the professionalism there. Yes, there's been some success, but I want to try and do it again. And the other thing, I suppose, is just trying to time your run correctly, because we have 22, 23 cars here this weekend. It is a long track, but nevertheless, I did see 1 or 2 people just backing up into the chicane to make sure they had a clean run coming out of that corner and down the short, sharp main straight. Was there an issue fueling the car a moment or two ago? Yeah, just a little bit of dribble down the... Oh, no, lots
more than a dribble, I think.
It certainly was.
But yeah,
as
you quite rightly said, Johnny, it's difficult because obviously there's so many corners that are so high speed, and you have to be massively committed to be quick round here, whatever you're driving. That if you're committed, we mentioned earlier on in the session about Pouon, for example, that double left-hander. you've then got the section immediately after that. And if you just catch somebody slightly wrong, even if you're not actually held up by them, it can just throw your momentum slightly, and it can also affect your line of sight through some of the very quick corners where you're just kind of a little bit distracted or a little bit put off by that driver immediately or that car immediately in front of you. And it's certainly, in a lot of cases, not an intentional from the driver ahead. It's just one of those unfortunate things. You just sometimes catch it wrong. You know, once upon a time, if we talked about F1 earlier, there used to be a thing where drivers were able to be a bit tactical and be a little bit, you know, gamesmanship, where they would deliberately kind of wander around in the middle of the circuit and kind of affect the other drivers. Now, obviously, we're in a world where, you know, you get a penalty for, you know, turning up with the wrong socks on or something like that. But
yeah.
I've done that before.
Yeah. We had a penalty during the European Le Mans Series meeting last weekend in Barcelona, which was a dressing infringement, I think it was labelled as, on the timing screen. Somebody had been, but actually I think it was to do with one of the pit crew that didn't have gloves on or didn't have the goggles on or something like that. And then there was another driver who had been spotted wearing jewellery. And if it's a necklace, that's a big no-no in a car, because if you need to get out quickly because it's on fire, a necklace could easily get hooked around some of the kit. So they were pulled in to remove that too. And some of the things you don't
Lewis
think
Hamilton
about.
got dressed down, didn't he, because of his propensity for wearing jewellery.
And that's not just on a fashion basis, that was safety related as well.
Safety-related thing, you know, and he was very upset and very, you know, taking it very personally. At the end of the day, it's an expression of your personality, isn't it? Something like that. And Lewis, as we know, has a particular style, which is, you know, pretty easy to understand, that he's got this vibe. Look at me using the word vibe like a youngster.
I'm fooled.
Yeah, my point. You know, and let's continue to think that's how he rolls.
It is. It sure is. But I do think if it starts to compromise, impinge on safety, then you know, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, the officials are going to clamp down on that, because they've got your interests in their mind at the end of the day. They're not doing it just to be awkward.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, you know, as drivers, you know when you go to scrutineering what's expected. You know, if you just take the equipment, for example, now they're so strict on things like, even joking aside, I saw it happen in a British touring car event last year where a driver failed the personal scrutineering because his socks had a little tear in them, literally at the top of the socks. It would make virtually zero difference in terms of his personal safety. God forbid that he was in a fire.
Yes.
Maybe half an inch, if that, or centimetre or whatever. But rules is rules. You know, you have to have, you know, undamaged, fireproof underwear, gloves. You know, gloves are a common one, and boots as well, because obviously they get worn. So the inside of the fingers and the palms can get a little bit damaged. On the boots, it can be somewhere around the heel area or something like that, because obviously they get warm when the drivers are driving the car. That's what they're there for. So, you know, it becomes quite an expensive thing to keep on top of. But, you know, as a percentage of what you're spending to go racing, whether you're a professional driver where you get your kit given to you, or whether you're, you know, a semi-pro or amateur driver where you have to get your own kit, you know, it's a relatively small thing. And ultimately, it's about making sure that the drivers and the crew, as you said, you know, sometimes it can be the pit crew as well, are absolutely, you know, protected to the necessary level. Because especially with the pit crew, for example, you know, those folks are generally doing a very difficult job, and then at the moment that they then have to, in a lot of international motorsport, they have to then go and do a pit stop which includes refueling. You know, obviously with the Creventic, the Michelin Creventic 24H series, we have a bespoke fueling area that the teams and drivers go to. So
we probably should point out, well, we'll get to that later in the day because it's not really relevant to radicals, but it is in a more conventional location than just in the back of the paddock this weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reason I was mentioning that when we were talking about this sort of safety equipment thing is that if you take something like European Le Mans, or obviously the World Endurance Championship that you're involved with quite heavily, you know, there's refueling in the pit lane with their own refueling rig. So obviously you can see why the safety equipment for the crew is absolutely crucial. You know, I remember probably 20 years ago being involved in the brick car 24 hours at Silverstone, and the car that I was driving then had a broken fuel tank, and the fuel tank split whilst the car was in the pit lane. And one of the things that struck me was, after I got out of the car, was I looked into the garage and there was all the friends and family just there, and you realise why now that's 20 odd years ago, where times have changed now, that no one's allowed in the garage and no one's allowed to be anywhere near where that could have been a disaster if that had gone bang, you know.
We've had 5 minutes, by the way. We're not missing anything regarding times because it takes such a long time to do an out lap and then do a warming up lap and then the push lap. So actually we've had nothing meaningful through, so hence why we're just having a bit of a chat, really.
Yeah, we are. We've only got one timed lap so far.
Well, okay.
Which is you know, the time lapse so far, and we've got a couple of purple sectors starting to come in, which you would expect because no one set a lap, so of course they're going to be purple sectors.
True, that's a fair point.
Fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Self-explanatory. 2:25.8 is the time from Peter Padden, but we can go a lot faster than that. And I think once Marcus Littlewood gets everything up to speed,
that was Peter we saw on track there in the very distinctive green and white Radical SR3 XXR, entered by GWR/RSR. So watching with interest to see how Peter gets on, of course, with the proudly displaying the Aussie flag on the end plate of the spinner. So he looks like that's Atlas Source. That's the 4 car of Lowe. So let's see Andrew Lowe having a little bit of an off there.
And did he do it all on his own? I fear that he did. I'm not sure. Is it 4 or 34?
No, 4.
It was 4, was it? Okay. Because 34 was in that vicinity as well.
Looked like what I... Oh,
64, actually. So neither of us were right with that.
Oh, there you go. Well, what do we know?
But Lowen like, Stevens. Now Lowen I remember as a name that was impressing me at Mugello. But... still clearly getting used to the ideal run into La Source. That was possibly something that Luke Breukers was suffering from, which was just tyres that weren't quite in the window. Maybe he left his braking a bit too late, but it was all on his own. Thankfully, not a full spin, just a slight rotation. Was able to locate first gear. And, I mean, you might be using first gear into La Source itself. I don't know how the gearboxes are configured for these cars. But it's a very, very low-speed corner. I mean, famous for the start of the Grand Prix lap. And if you dreamt up a corner that you would start a race with for calamity and chaos, that would be it, I think.
Was it 2012 where they all kind of flew all over each other? I think that was the famous one where Grosjean got banned, didn't he?
Yeah, Romain Grosjean went over the top of another.
Over the top of, I think he almost took Fernando Alonso's head off,
because that was easily pre-Halo, wasn't it?
Was pre-Halo.
Many years before the Halo was
because then there was another similar shunt, which I remember involved Leclerc. He was a victim of it, and the Halo saved him in that instance.
Yes,
that would have been a horrible accident, God forbid, gone wrong. So Luke Kendall crossing the line, 2:25.603, so still not quite down into the 2:24s that we saw as our pole position lap. Could be just the fact that he's just getting into the groove quite early on in this session. 12 minutes almost exactly remaining of this session here, which when you look at the lap, then you know you're going to get probably, I would say, 3 maybe 4 push laps, because you're going to do, you know, well, as we said earlier, the old push call push kind of thing.
Yep.
It's unlikely you'd probably do 2 push laps on the bounce, because it's a long lap and because the ambient for the time of day is relatively high. I think when I drove into the circuit about an hour ago, it was, you know, we were up at the sort of 14-15 degrees mark, which for, you know, this time of the morning,
I know, for
Spa-Francorchamps, certainly, you know, a few of my friends are coming this weekend to watch, and they have every possible clothing option you could imagine.
Yeah,
you know, everything from a full-blown kind of you know, Jamaican holiday type clothing, all the way through to biblical rain, which we've all seen at Spa over the years, haven't we? Everything in between.
And you can look at all the weather forecasts you could wish. You could have them coming out of your ears, and none of them are generally right, because it's somewhere in between the two. So yeah, best to expect absolutely everything in terms of weather, and sometimes in action as well. As there is the number 4 car. So Andy Lowe's car is that kind of orange and white paint scheme.
So apologies, Andy, I misidentified you earlier. It was my ancient eyes didn't work particularly well. So
well, also where the number panel sits on the side of these Radicals, it's not flat, so you kind of see
Thank you for helping me out there, Johnny. That's very kind of you. But it's basically me just being a bit rubbish.
There was an element of that as well.
Andy. Yes. Any of Andy's friends and family, sponsors, whatever, watching, my sincere apologies. There he is, doing a great job.
Indeed.
You look back though at the 31 car of Padden, still sitting P2 at the moment, 0.192 off of the quickest lap of the session, which was set earlier on by Luke Kendall. And down in the pit lane, we have somebody that I know very well, who's an exceptionally talented racing driver, races in GTs now, but has raced in radicals before, based in Dubai, is a certain Mr. James Winslow, with our friend Sarah.
Well, welcome down here. Not in the cars this weekend, but doing something a little bit different. Can you tell us more about your role here this weekend and who you're supporting?
Yeah, the Radical UK Cup has come to Europe. They're back in Europe, racing here at Spa-Francorchamps. There's obviously multiple championships around the world in the Gulf and UAE, Dubai and UK, Australia. And Spa's one of the drivers' most favourite tracks, so people have flown in from Australia and all over the world for this event. This is the first round of the Creventic Radical Series. I think there's a 4-race championship. And me and George have come along to support our drivers in the series.
Tell us more about what the support looks like. How can you come to Spa and not get out on the track? Or have you been out on the track setting reference laps?
Yes, I've done quite a bit of driving in the last 2 days. They've changed the tyre compared to what these guys are used to in their own countries. So it's a completely different tyre, so the setup needs to change. I've been jumping in and just making sure the cars are nice and fun for our guys to drive. Amir Faisalin won the national championship in Dubai. It's his first time at Spa. Steve Champion has won national championships in previous years in Australia. This is his first time at Spa, so it's a big jump up. It's an old school track, and it's a scary track if the car's got oversteer. So yeah, I just make sure the cars were fast but safe, not too much oversteer, so they can get nice and flat through Eau Rouge nice and safely.
Tell us more about the new tyre.
The new tyre was a surprise to us all. It was a bit of a last-minute thing. The cars were set up on the C52 Hankook, and now there's an R54 tyre, which I'd never seen before, and it's a slightly different size, different feeling. So the drivers are still adapting to this new tyre. It's a bit of an unknown what it's going to do on the long run in a 50-minute race, but we're learning and collecting data on it all the time. Hankook do a good job with the tyres, so I'm sure it will be fine once we work out exactly what it needs.
Wonderful. Well, George, a lot of people have been saying incredible weather so far this weekend. I don't want to jinx it. You might escape the rain tomorrow. The Radical race is quite early.
Yeah, I mean, Spa's always a little bit, you never know with the weather here. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, but not too much. So the weather forecast is looking pretty good for the weekend. Fingers crossed, but Spa, you just never know. Amir done some laps in the wet yesterday, so he's looking good for wet conditions. So yeah, we're feeling confident, whatever weather.
Well, thank you both for having a chat. Different role this weekend, I guess. Well, Jamie, you do a lot of coaching. You're getting into it a little bit more, but thank you so much for having a chat.
So George King and Jamie Winslow, coaching duty for them this weekend. Interesting points made, though, about the change of... I was wondering whether they were meaning it was a different tyre manufacturer, but still Hankook, but whereas they were expecting one type of Hankook, they're now presented with a different one. So a little bit more of a challenge for those not used to this set of tyres. There is, by the way, Sarah mentioned tomorrow morning's race, which is a 9:40 start, but there's a race today as well, race 1, which we've already qualified for and provisionally set the grid for. That is at 5 to 2 this afternoon, also for 50 minutes, with the mandatory pit stop halfway in the middle. So 5 to 2 until 2:45, race 1 on Friday here at Spa. It's all changed, Simon, at the top, although has it changed again since we were just having that conversation?
Well, we're looking at the timing screens. We've got Philip Svensson in the SR10 Radical car on the grid in that spec. He's currently quickest by just over, where are we? Just over 4 seconds, or just under 4 seconds rather. So that's pretty impressive stuff. So just checking that that's a genuine lap, and there's no disrespect to Philip. It's because to be that much quicker is obviously quite a surprise. But if you then look at the rest of it, the regular sort of guys and folks that we see at the front, Marcus Littlewood is quickest of the SR3 XXRs on a 2:24.321, which I seem to remember he's about a tenth quicker than he went in the first one. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yes.
Addled, aging brain seems to remember these things. And he is on. He was quickest by just under 7 tenths in that class for ahead of Luke Kendall. So we heard him talking to Sarah at the end of this first session and seemed pretty chilled and pretty confident that there was a little bit of everywhere, as often is the way. around a lap like this, where you have so many, you know, what's it, 15, 16 corners, you have so many places you can find big chunks of time. You know, if you take your Brave pills, well, you know, along with your Weetabix, cereals are available, for breakfast, you know, then that would find a fair bit of time out that massively fast section. Sector 2 is where you have to have your big person pants on, isn't it? That's the really fast and leery bit.
But it is an interesting lap in that you need straight line speed for the first sector. Out of La Source, you know, I don't know whether you're going to be flat in one of these cars through Eau Rouge, probably not, but it'll be a blend of the throttle, and then it's foot to the boards all the way up the Kemmel Straight. But then you need downforce from Les Combes all the way through the snaky bit, pretty much to the right-hander at what they used to call Stavelot. They don't anymore. That's Curve Paul Frere now, after the French journalist. Is he Belgian?
French-Belgium. 1960 Le Mans winner.
Very good knowledge, Simon.
Yeah.
I can see why you were booked for this gig now, because you can cover the 60s.
Sad anorak fact, I can actually name every Le Mans winner since the war. So you can throw that one at me if you really want to. And I promise you, folks, that's not a Google thing. It's just I do that just when I'm.
Are you just talking about manufacturer, or are you talking about drivers?
Drivers.
You can name the drivers as well.
Since 1949.
All right.
I'll throw one at me, and I'll just to show off.
Okay, I'm going to go for 1967.
That was AJ Foyt, Dan Gurney, and a Ford Mark IV. There you go. And that was the famous one where Dan Gurney christened the spraying of the champagne.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about radicals.
3 minutes and 40 seconds to go.
As my history of motorsport may well be or not be. Philip Svensson still quickest, but Marcus Littlewood, our championship leader and pole man from our first session, quickest in the SR3 XXR class. The 224.256, gone even quicker. We saw him as at 224.3 early on. A couple of green sectors looking very, very strong as we look at the 54 car of Luke Kendall, the man who started on or will start on the front row for the first race. Currently third in this session. Peter Padden, that was on pole early on, the Australian, in the pit lane at the moment. So I don't know whether that's a tactical or setup change, or hopefully no issues with the car. And Jack Yang, currently P5 ahead of Lowen Stevens, who we shall have a little bit of a spin. Misidentified, and apologies once again to Mr. Lowe, because that was my fault.
Well, and that happened at the first corner, and now interestingly the yellow flags are out at the first corner again, although they've just been withdrawn. But clearly somebody's had maybe a half moment at La Source again, so there would have been, well, I was going to say no overtaking permitted. That still is the case for a qualifying session, but also maybe you need to notably show that you've backed off a little bit, so you wouldn't be able to set a pole position with a yellow flag on part of the circuit. Quite a bit more gravel being brought onto the track as well. That is another area where, I mean, the gravel's been in there for probably 3 years or so now, but gone are the days where if you overcook La Source, you used to go way out wide and actually not lose much time. Now it really is damaging.
Exactly. Well, as I said, I've only lucky enough to race here once. That was in the year 2000, and I remember, you know, it was a very wet race, and you were, because there was a bit more grip out there, weirdly, you were deliberately driving right the way out. We didn't have those dreaded words track limits in the vocabulary in those days. And myself and the other drivers that we were fighting, the guy that won the championship that year was Adam, oh God, brain's gone. I think
you can name every Le Mans winner from 1940, whatever, but now
I can't remember who won the championship that I was racing in. Yeah. Anyway,
you'll remember it as soon as we finish.
Nortel, but I can't remember his bloody name. But anyway, excuse my language.
Don't worry.
So there we go.
As soon as we finished this little segment of the day, it'll come right back to you. There's Marcus Littlewood in the RSR car, so still not on pole position, but it's not really a fair fight because the SR10, with its extra horsepower, slightly heavier as I was detailing earlier on, but it's got 400 odd horsepower versus an SR3 with only half that amount of power. So we can kind of discount Philip Svensson. He's already parked it because he thinks I'm on a 3.3 second advantage, if that is a legit time. I mean, it's not been deleted, so we assume that it has to be.
I think you're right, Johnny. It's a legit time. It's just, you know, just trying to balance out with only one car as a point of reference in that class, quite literally in a class of his own. It's difficult to say. Obviously, his co-driver wasn't as quick in the first session, so perhaps didn't really show the performance of the car.
Yes, true.
As often is the way in sports car racing. You have, you know, potentially two drivers, and very rarely are they at the same level. You know, usually have a pro-am type situation in most of these types of racing. We heard from James Winslow earlier. He's a good example of what would happen where you have a pro like James would share with one of his customer drivers. You know, James runs a team in the Middle East where he's based. He's based in Dubai. Hugely successful team. You know, we heard he was talking a little bit about his drivers that are competing here, or the guys that he's working with, Amir Fayzulin, and also Steve Champion. So, you know, those drivers getting their heads around it. Checkered flag is out now. Marcus Littlewood coming across the line now. Let's see, does he improve? Crosses the line, 2:26.830. No, so he's down a little bit on his best. But of the regular championship contenders, are the drivers that are racing in the SR3 XXRs, quickest once again, Marcus Littlewood. He is the absolute class of the field in terms of pure speed at this stage. But this driver as well, super impressive job by the 54 car of Luke Kendall.
And what I don't know is what Luke hasn't quite got right in this session. I should have read the regulations in full to work out whether you have to continue with the same set of tyres. If you do, then that's pretty tough, because you will have worked them hard in Quali 1 and then needed to go through another heat cycle. Was it that maybe if you do get new tyres, Luke's just overworked them a tad because he's further away than the Marcus Littlewood time at nearly 3/4 of a second, the difference between Littlewood and Kendall. Jack Young's still right up there, though, for Valor Racing, and Peter Padden, who has actually had a better run in qualifying too. He threatened to be something like 3rd or 4th fastest in Q1, but then couldn't sustain that. But having parked it in the pits a couple of laps ago, does look like it's going to be a 4th place start for the SR3s, 5th place overall once you factor in Philip Svensson's time, which is the anomaly because that's the SR10 and therefore not comparable equipment. But a few more still to see the flag, including Luke Kendall.
Yeah,
but he's
looking at his sector, though, Johnny, I don't think he's going to improve looking at it. Certainly, his first sector wasn't down in. His second sector is down a little bit on his best. So, you know, if you watch this, if you watch motorsport regularly, you'll know that the colours of the sectors are quite significant. So if you can see a green sector, that's the driver's personal best, and a purple sector, that's what we all want to see as racing drivers, is a purple sector, which is the quickest.
Or purple lap time, ideally.
Or purple lap time, even better. But yeah, purple sectors, 3 purple sectors and a purple lap. Oh, that's beautiful.
That's the clean sweep.
That's just heaven as a racing driver or a team. That's yeah. Just you know, that is the phrase. I think smashing it is exactly what you did. So great job by Luke and Marcus, and obviously Philip Svensson. Congratulations on his pole position for the Swedish driver. A brilliant job there. Some really impressive performances throughout the grid, and we look forward to the first of our 50-minute races a little bit later today.
Yep, we will be on air just before the start of that, which is scheduled for a 5 to 2 beginning to the race, but we'll probably have 5 or 10 minutes build-up. And let's keep our fingers crossed for Marcus Littlewood, who's going to have his car scrutineered along with others now as well. And whereas the scrutineering checks were not passed by Marcus's ride height, or not Marcus's ride height, but his car's ride height, you get a roller, or I think this is how it's done. The roller needs to go underneath the car from all 4 sides of it, and if anything obstructs it, even if it's a bit of bodywork hanging off, you immediately fail the ride height.
It's a very tough test, to be honest. I've seen it. As some of you may know, I've come from a background being involved in British touring cars for many years.
Cars like that are no stranger to having a bit of body hanging off the side, shall we say.
And, you know, we had a situation with Jake a few years ago where he clipped the curb and it broke the bolt underneath it, and basically it was hanging down by a couple of mil.
Let's just do the times then. 2:20.948 is the Philip Svensson time in the SR10. Then you get to the SR3 XXRs, and Marcus Littlewood by 0.7 of a second is faster than Luke Kendall, but that's going to be a fascinating race between the two of them. Why not lump in Jack Young and Peter Padden as well? He'll start from 4th and 5th positions. Chris Preen had a good run to 6th fastest ahead of Lowen Stevens, who was impressive in Mugello. Andrew Lowe, Erland Olsen and Sebastian Schou completing the top 10. Then it's Luke Broikers, the guest driver this weekend, because of all of his good work in the 24H series. We're seeing how he can get on in the Radical Nederland car this weekend ahead of John McLeod. Then Emir Faisalin, we have Jahid Faisal Kareem in the number 77 car, Brian Huang in the number 6 ahead of Robin Greenhalgh and Steve Champion, Sean Hanna, Eddie Van Dam and Diego Dambra, who was in the wars a little bit in Mugello, actually. A quick car, but he couldn't stay out of trouble, often not of his own making. Valerie Bachmann and Jess Franson. Jess's car, the number 55, has been in and out of the pits. They've been trying to chase some sort of issue with that car, so we wish them well in the intervening period between the end of qualifying and the first race today. As mentioned then, it's a couple of hours before we get going with the racing for the Radical Cup Europe. Their first race is today, prior to the qualifying sessions for the 24H series cars, because there are 6 qualifying sessions in order to form their grid for this weekend's 12 hours of Spa. But from a Radical Cup Europe perspective, we are back for you at 1 to 2 this afternoon, Central European summertime, as we are now on. And that's to mark your card for later. But plenty happening during 2 reasonably short up sessions. So let's catch you up with the action that we've had so far with the Radical Cup Europe. Sadly, though, battling mechanical dramas in and out of the pits. Marcus Littlewood didn't take too long at all to start setting good times, but he has got a stern rival this weekend who he will have to definitely keep his eye on. Luke Kendall in the number 54 car, shading and sharing times with the man of the moment in Mugello, Marcus Littlewood, and they will start on the front row for race 1 later on today. That's us done and dusted for Radicals, but get back to us again on the YouTube stream, where we will have the full first race of the weekend live at 1:55. We will speak to you later.